Welcome, Commanders, to Starfleet Academy for Star Trek Fleet Command. I am Captain Pike, and this is the Academy's crew analysis of B'Elanna Torres. B'Elanna Torres was introduced into the game in the May 2023 arc Voyager Part 1. Now let's take a look and see who B'Elanna Torres is. B'Elanna Torres is a rare officer. She is a member of the Voyager group, and her faction is Federation. She is of the Officer Division Engineering, and as an engineer, she will provide full synergy to any Command or Science Division member of the Voyager group, and partial synergy to other engineers. Her captain ability is Unfit to Lead. This officer does not have a captain's maneuver. Equipping this officer in the captain's seat provides no benefits. I believe I'm okay with B'Elanna Torres having no officer ability, as this does kind of fit her character dynamics. What do you think about B'Elanna Torres not having a captain ability? Her officer ability is Me Against the Galaxy. When you take damage from a non-player hostile or Armada, B'Elanna increases your armor piercing, shield piercing, and accuracy by 250% of attack for 1 round. This will increase to 1500% at Commander 5. I do want to note, when testing B'Elanna Torres, I was seeing her proc multiple times in the same round, so I'm curious if this ability actually stacks or not. A quick review of the very short battle logs that I had while farming parts was not telling enough if she was stacking, and a double increase of T3 Torres may not be that noticeable. An additional, more detailed review is probably warranted, but I don't think it's going to impact how we choose to use her. This ability may be more useful than expected. What sets B'Elanna Torres' officer ability apart from other officers in our roster is she is not ship type locked, making her more versatile in the outside triangle battles when it comes to PVE targets such as Armadas, bosses, and hostiles. She's going to perform the same no matter what target she's going against, as long as it's not a player. The one thing we are going to have to keep in mind is that she does rely on our attack total, increasing our piercing and accuracy stats based on her current level's percentage. So if you use her, make sure you stack attack below the deck. There are a few things that I like about B'Elanna Torres' officer ability. One of those is that it's not locked to a hostile type, which kind of is important since she does work against Armadas and bosses, as well as the hostiles. Officer abilities do not rely on synergy to be effective, so her officer ability will be effective no matter what crew she's used with. And this does go all the way up to 1500%. The one thing that we do have to remember is that she is not a flat boost to piercing and accuracy. She is reliant on the attack value for our crew below the deck. So she's going to be dependent on how many slots and how high we can get that attack value on our ships. Her officer ability is beneficial to almost any player in the game. B'Elanna Torres will get you another potential hostile grinding crew build outside of your normal grinding crew, or there's a chance she could supplement one of your current hostile grinding crew as a better alternative. For some commanders that do not have decent alternative officers, Torres could be a pivotal officer in providing PVE penetration values that you may not already have. But for more experienced commanders, B'Elanna's officer ability may not be as valuable because of their current available roster. She is, however, a good backup crew member for multi-ship hostile grind sessions. We will review this in more detail in the section where we discuss how we can use B'Elanna. B'Elanna Torres' below the deck ability is Knock It Down. This is a 10% chance each round to apply Hull Breach to non-player hostiles or Armadas for 1 round, going up to 100% chance at Commander. What I really like about this is that it does give us hull breach potential without having to sacrifice a bridge seat. Also like that this goes all the way up to 100% chance at commander, so once she's maxed out, she's a guaranteed hull breach officer below the deck. She's not locked to hostile type, again just like her officer ability, and she'll work against armadas, bosses, and hostiles. The things that we need to keep in mind, or that are not so good, is that she's really weak at ensign up to lieutenant, where she's sitting underneath the 50% chance for that hull breach potential. The other thing is that she's independent to other hull breach officers, so she's not going to stack if you're running Lorca in an officer seat and B'Elanna below the deck. Torres' below the deck ability is not really going to be beneficial to commanders until she's at least T4 or lieutenant commander. This is the point when she breaks the 50% chance milestone and has better odds of proccing, giving us the opportunity to free up a bridge slot for other synergy. B'Elanna Torres' traits are engineer and analytical. There are 16 ATAs that require engineering trait. Most of these will adjust based on our operations brackets. Her engineering ATAs are accelerated bioforming. There are 3 levels of experimental procedures scaling at your ops. There are 2 levels of gas contractor, also scaling at ops. Geological evaluation for gas, geothermal conditioning for gas, planetside shipyard, salvage operations for each of the ship classes, battleship, explorer, interceptor, and survey, scientific breakthrough, and sensor analysis, finally terraforming expedition. There are 8 ATAs that need the analytical trait. Those are Arbiter of Succession, Calculated Treachery, Explorer, Galactic Barrier, Forensic Investigation, Investigate Borg Signal, Observing Colonar, Senate Hearing, and Tactical Simulator that's only available at 30 plus ops. None of the ATAs use both of B'Elanna Torres' traits, so if you invest trait XP into B'Elanna Torres, you'll not get a maximum return like you would from an officer that has dual traits on an ATA. With the number of engineering and analytical ATAs that she can be used in, I would give her a high interest in investing trait XP into her. That's of course if you want to risk sending her out on ATAs instead of using her on your ship. This is purely because of the number of ATAs that she can participate that I rate her that high. There are several variables that go into how well crew performs. Research, ship type, and crew levels all are critical factors. Some of these suggestions may not work for you. The intent is to get you thinking of how you could incorporate the crew into your build and whether or not it's a good choice for you to use. We have a lot of helpful people in our Discord that would be happy to help you further with your crew questions. Click the link in the description, come join or start the conversation. Now, thinking about B'Elanna Torres' ability, let's see how we can put her to work. B'Elanna Torres is not a PvP officer, and commanders will not find value in using her officer ability or below the deck abilities in PvP. It's just not going to happen if you read the description of her officer abilities. Both abilities state non-player. So our dreams of glorious PvP with B'Elanna Torres leveraging her Klingon side is not going to happen. So we'll have to settle for PvP activities. First, let's discuss freebooters. Is there value in using B'Elanna Torres for freebooters? The easy answer is yes. Some players may find value in using B'Elanna Torres against freebooters. She is not going to be a tower replacement. She is going to give you an alternative, non-triangle focused crew build for your freebooter hostiles. This means that the crew is not dependent on the battle triangle. but keep in mind your ship still is. Looking at options to use B'Elanna Torres in a bridge seat, we will need to leverage a version of the Freebooter crew that is working well for you now. To test if she is better than your current Freebooter setup, you will need to replace the officer that you feel is your least contributor to your Freebooter success. I won't go into details for the PMC or PMT builds, but you could easily replace your Chen or Talon in these builds with B'Elanna Torres and most likely see success. You will now need to stack attack below the deck where you didn't before. There are two builds that I will cover that worked well for me against freebooters below and above 51. The first build is a Tau setup. This Tau crew normally has Strange New World Triangle Officer, GG, and Tau. To modify this build, we will replace our triangle-based crew with B'Elanna. To do this, we will need to move Tau into the captain's seat, since neither GG nor B'Elanna have captain's abilities that we can leverage. And for those of you who are wondering who GG is, that would be Giorgio from your Discovery crew. Tau's captain ability is Loyal Officer. This is going to give us, when fighting battleships, Tau increases the weapon's damage of the ship by 20%, and his officer ability is resistant. As long as the opponent's ship is burning, Tau decreases its hull health by 5% each turn. This goes all the way up to 10% at Commander. Next, in an officer seat, we're going to need a burning officer. I like to go with Giorgio, but you could also sub in Nero in this officer seat to generate burning. Giorgio, of course, is my first choice because of Deceptive Warfare. At the beginning of each round, Giorgio has a 50% chance of burning the opponent's ship for 2 rounds. This is at the beginning of each round, and it's a 50% chance. This goes up to 80% at Commander. Because Giorgio is going to activate at the beginning of the round, this also means that Tau has a chance to activate in round 1 of combat. Nero is our second choice for activating the burning condition because of his officer ability. See the flaws. Every time the ship strikes the opponent with a weapon attack, Nero has a 25% chance of burning it for 2 rounds. This goes up to 50% at Commander. This downside is that Nero will only trigger when the weapon attacks. This means that burning will not be active at the beginning of the round when Tau would activate himself. So, in round 1, we would never get an activation from Tau. Thankfully, Freebooters fire 6 weapons in round 1. This will greatly help us in getting Nero to activate round 1. And finally, we'll place B'Elanna Torres to get her piercing and accuracy ability based on the percent of crew attack. So this also means we need to make sure that we put attack below the deck. In testing, this build worked fairly well. It did not outperform the original setup, but if you don't have Strange New World Triangle officers, this could be a good way for you to leverage Tau. Our second build, we use 5 of 11, Gorkin or Lorca, and Khan. And in this build, we're going to replace Khan with B'Elanna. 5 of 11, we will leverage both her captain and officer's ability. Although her officer's ability is not really going to help us with the target win, but the ability is still very useful. Her captain ability is weaponry is irrelevant. 5 of 11 increases the shield deflection, armor, and dodge by 200% of the total health of all officers on the ship. Her officer ability is you will be assimilated. 5 of 11 increases the amount of resources your ship receives from hostiles by 20%, going up to 100% at Commander. Like I said, This won't benefit us defeating the Freebooters, but it'll be nice when we do defeat the Freebooters. With our original build, we would use either Gorkin or Lorca, but with B'Elanna replacing Khan and Gorkin's officer ability creating opportunities, reading when the ship hits the opponent with a critical hit, Gorkin has a 70% chance of causing a hull breach for 3 rounds on the opponent's ship. His chance goes up to 90%. The issue is here, he is dependent on Khan's ability triggering, and since we're removing Khan, we would need Hugh below the deck to trigger Gorkin's ability. This makes Lorca and his officer ability our preferred hull breach crew. Lorca's quick thinking triggers at the beginning of each round. Lorca has a 50% chance of dealing hull breach to the opponent's ship for 2 rounds, and at Commander, this goes up to 80%. As you can see, would be our preferred officer for creating hull breach. He's not dependent on the other conditions, but has a chance to execute the condition at the start of the round. We will then sub in B'Elanna for Khan. We will lose Khan's critical generation, but we would gain B'Elanna's penetration and accuracy. This build really is dependent on hull breach and critical chance. You can boost the performance of this build if you have Hugh to place below the deck since we removed Khan. And to really set both of these builds off, if you happen to have Hugh, put him below the deck. He's going to give you a flat out boost to your critical chance and is going to be very helpful against the Freebooters. If you want more information on Hugh, make sure to check out our video on him in the above link. Figuring out how we're going to use B'Elanna below the deck is a bit easier. We can take our current build that works for us now against the Freebooters and pick one of our below the deck crew to replace with B'Elanna. This, however, is only going to be as effective as B'Elanna's level is. With our second build with 5 Lorca and Khan, we could potentially replace Lorca with another crew if our B'Elanna is at Lieutenant Commander or higher. The reason I say this is that Lieutenant Commander B'Elanna Torres breaks that 50% chance, hitting 60%, and that goes up to 100% at Commander. Crewing for bosses is always fun. There is the challenge of figuring out what is the boss's strength and then how to counter it. Not all bosses will follow the Explorer Battleship Interceptor rules of Explorers will equal shields, battleships will equal hull, and interceptors will equal dodge, especially as you get up in operations level and higher missions. Ultimately here, I'm going to recommend that you run B'Elanna Torres below the deck. Again, her performance is going to be best when she is Lieutenant Commander or higher, as she will be over the 50% milestone for activation. Replacing her with a below the deck crew, that's not going to hurt the crew stats you need for your bridge crew if they are depending on any stats. Against mission bosses with B'Elanna below the deck, she is going to perform best when you are running a critical based crew. As for B'Elanna on the bridge, you could put her in place of lower performing officers in your build if you need more penetration power. For example, you could put B'Elanna into a build that has James T. Kirk and Spock. Kirk will boost the status of your officers, increasing the attack you need for B'Elanna. He will also inspire morale for Spock, who will restore shield health based on the defenses of your officers. This is going to provide penetration and accuracy based on your attack, so you will want to stack attack and defense below the deck. For hostile grinding, there are 3 things we want to consider for any crew build. These are damage mitigation, damage absorption, and damage output. B'Elanna is going to increase our damage capability or output with her officer ability Me Against the Galaxy. I ran B'Elanna in the officer seat on a few different crew builds based on what we know about her ability and other officers. Since I have TNG Picard And Picard's captain ability is going to boost her officer ability. And since my B'Elanna is only T3, I wanted to boost this officer ability some. In this build, we put TNG Picard in the captain's seat, TNG Beverly, and B'Elanna. TNG Picard's captain ability is Make It So. Jean-Luc Picard is going to increase the effectiveness of all officer abilities that trigger in combat by 20%. This ability receives the same synergy bonus from all TNG officers, regardless of their class, getting a 100% boost from TNG Beverly. His officer ability is Engage. Jean-Luc Picard is going to increase our critical hit damage by 5%. Picard's officer ability goes up to 25% at the level of Commander. Not only is TNG Beverly going to provide synergy with TNG Picard, but her officer ability, Unshakable Moral Code, is going to increase armor, shield deflection, and dodge by 150% of the defenses of all the officers on the ship when fighting hostiles and armadas. This is going to go up to 350% when she is commander. And finally, we have B'Elanna Torres and her officer ability. This build works fairly well, especially on even tiered hostiles. Once you start to punch up though, it struggles just a little bit. It would make a good alternative grinding crew, or if you are looking for a third officer to complement TNG Picard and Beverly. Here's another option we can try if we don't have Picard. We can leverage B'Elanna Torres with Pike and Morio. Kelvin Pike is going to bring his captain ability, Teaching Moments. This is going to increase the effectiveness of all officer abilities that trigger in combat by 40%. His officer ability is Advanced Training, and this is going to increase the ship XP earned by in combat by 20%. At Commander, this will go up to 60%. Morio is going to create synergy with Pike, and she's going to bring her officer ability No Fear, which decreases the armor piercing, shield piercing, and accuracy of hostiles by 30%. This is going to go up to 70% at Commander. And for B'Elanna, Pike will boost B'Elanna's ability based on his captain's ability bonus, and any buffs he's getting from his synergy officer Morio. In this case, a max Pike with a synergy officer will boost B'Elanna's ability by 120%. For Below the Deck, we'll do the same thing that we did with our Freebooter Below the Deck. We're going to replace one of our least performing officers below the deck that's not going to hurt our stats if we're dependent on them with B'Elanna. And again, remember that this is purely going to be beneficial if B'Elanna is at a level of Lieutenant Commander or higher. For Armadas, most of us have staple crews out there already that we like to run. So, is B'Elanna really going to take the seat of one of these officers? In the beginning, maybe not, but there is potential for her if your crew selection is struggling to come up with that final officer. With that in mind, let's think about crewing for solo armadas and setting up 3 ships. This puts you in a scenario where you may be searching for that final crew member to put on that last ship. So, we're struggling to find that final officer for your third crew build. B'Elanna may be a good choice, especially if you have your mitigation figured out but struggling with boosting your damage output. Placing B'Elanna in the officer's seat will gain you the piercing and accuracy that could tip the scales. An example, we could run TNG Picard, TNG Beverly, and B'Elanna Torres. Below the deck, again, will be easier. You will want to put B'Elanna below the deck, replacing the least beneficial officer of your critical builds to improve the damage done by activating the hull breach condition. She will benefit critical builds like DS9 Solo Crew, Cisco, O'Brien, and Bashir, or the classic Armada crew 5, 6, and Khan, bringing potential hull breach to both of these builds. So we're interested in B'Elanna. How are we going to acquire her crew shards? Currently, there is no known sourcing path published by Scopely outside of events and the store for B'Elanna. So, if you're interested in her, you will need to keep an eye on these sourcing paths, like crew special battle passes between the arcs, or the mega crew recruit events, and potentially special packs in the store. In conclusion, I think there is hidden potential in B'Elanna Torres when it comes to being a valuable crew member. Ultimately, her true overall value will be determined by the additional Voyager crew released in upcoming arcs. Some pros that we find about B'Elanna are her hull breach below the deck. This is going to free up that officer slot. Again, this really only comes into play at Lieutenant Commander or higher. At Commander, that's a 100% chance of hull breach. Her ability is not locked to a ship or to a weapon type. It will also work against hostiles, bosses, and armadas. Some negatives we have about B'Elanna Torres is that her below the deck ability is really weak when it's below Lieutenant Commander. Her officer ability is also dependent on the amount of crew attack. So if we don't have a lot of crew slots below to increase that attack amount, she's going to struggle. And her officer ability does require one hit to trigger. B'Elanna Torres has me curious with what we will see released in Voyager Part 2. With her and the Doctor, whose crew assessment will be coming soon, it will be interesting to see who our synergy epic officer that's gonna sit in the captain seat will be. Check out our website for more videos. And join us in Discord using the link in the video description to continue the discussion and get access to more resources. We hope you found the video informative and helpful. If so, please give us a thumbs up and share. We look forward to your comments and suggestions. Live long and prosper, Commander. I'll see you at the Academy.